Chairman. With me are Giselle Joffer and Frank O'Brien, members of the board. Welcome. Tonight's hearing is going to be focused on engineering, meaning stormwater, utilities, and all of the attendant engineering functions and steps and improvements that are proposed with respect to the applicant. I see that Mr. Burke, the applicant's engineer, is here. Welcome, Mr. Burke. And I know that the applicant's counsel is going to be late. He's written that he's late. I do think he will be in attendance. He has authorized us to proceed. I've got some preliminary comments I want to make about the hearing, about last night's hearing. But I'm going to suspend that pending applicant's counsel being here. And I'm going to invite, unless there's an objection from the members, I'll invite Mr. Burke to begin his presentation with respect to engineering on the site. Members, no objections? Please proceed, Mr. Burke. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, let me start again. How's that?
Better.
Again, thanks for letting me speak tonight about civil engineering and about this particular project at 582 Blue Hill Ave. My name is Jim Burke. I am a registered professional civil engineer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I am part owner of the Sell Burke Sala civil engineering and land survey firm with offices in Quincy, Massachusetts. We've been involved in this project since 2019, and we've prepared land survey plans along with civil site engineering plans in support of a 118-unit residential building. If I may, I just assume walk everybody through the civil site plans, and in this particular format, I think it's actually beneficial when you're sitting in an audience. Sometimes you're sitting so far back you can't see the details of the plans. In this particular instance, it actually works out well. If I may. Does that work for everybody? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Cover sheet is exactly that. Just kind of it shows you a locus of where the site is, located along Blue Hill Ave. We typically use a Google Maps insert with north straight up. It gives you an idea that Blue Hill Ave is running northeast, southwest in a direction. Team members are here. Contact information you can all find over in this particular location here. Second sheet is a land survey plan. You can, the detail on this particular project was substantial with regards to the house and the number of trees that we had to locate, the wall along Blue Hill Ave, the utilities. Also, you'll see you have an existing 12-inch water main along with a 6-inch water main located on the other side. You'll see the brick wall that isn't retaining, it's just more decorative, that provides privacy for the lot itself. You can see the detail for the existing homes and the carriage house, along with the circular drive that provides access into the lot currently. You have some a gravel drive that provides access to the back, to a lawn area, as well as a bocce court, which I'm a fan, to tell you the truth. Also, we've located a wetland. We've received an ORAD from the Milton Conservation Commission with regards to the wetland resource that is located off-site. It's a bank of an intermittent stream located with the wetlands flags here. We had a professional wetland scientist, Ecotech, out of Worcester, delineate this and prepare the filing with the Conservation Commission. You can see the applicable 100-year buffer that comes onto the property, and for the reason of why we had to delineate that particular stream. Down south, you can see a little bit of detail that we did on Meeting House Lane. The drainage, as well as a sewer manhole, provides some utility identification for Meeting House Lane and how it impacts this particular lot. The topography, you can see we're running at about, I think that's elevation 130. My eyes are getting bad. Let's see, yep, 130. And it slopes all the way down to the the westerly corner to an elevation. I think that's, let's see, I'll take a peek at that as well. There we go, here's 90 here, and it drops off significantly in this particular location. But, you know, you're looking at, you know, a decent slope for the particular lot. But you can get a kind of a total view of the lot, and everyone will be able to do the site walk and get a feel for the 4 acres that we've detailed on this particular plan. What I'm trying to do is move to the next page. There we go. Let's try that. The next plan is a construction management plan, really just designed as a precursor to a SWIP permit, which is, since this is over an acre of construction, that we'll have to file a permit with the federal government to make sure that we're doing it in a manner that meets sediment control, stormwater control, et cetera, during construction. We have a erosion control barrier running around the perimeter of the site at the limit of work. You can see construction apron here. We're going to be using the existing curb cuts to access the site, and both curb cuts there. We'll be relocating a portion of the wall to redo the entrances to meet Mass Highway requirements. So there'll be some alteration of the existing wall here. What I'm also showing here is the removal of some of the trees in the area that are marked out in red with a line through them. Those trees are all to be removed. If it doesn't have a line through them, those trees are going to be staying. As you can see, the site, most of it is being removed, and we're going to be looking at a clean site to construct the building. Next plan we have is the layout plan. Kind of gives you an idea of how the building sits on the lot and the dimensions of the lot itself. The driveway, as discussed earlier, with the curb cuts in the similar locations where they currently are. We have a 24-foot wide drive that extends down into the site as the main entrance and egress for the property, accessing a 15-car parking lot on the surface, and then allowing proceed down to the garage, to the lower level to access into the garage. At this point, the way actually reduces down to 20 feet and connects up to Blue Hill Ave for secondary egress. It becomes one way at this location here, and it's two-way up through here in this location. For the dimensions of the building, you're looking at 320 feet across, 220 feet at the largest depth. The building, you can kind of see, it looks like a TIE fighter, if you will. So you have wings here with a connector in between This is, the large courtyard that landscape architect did a nice job with regards to developing an area for residents to kind of spend some time. But layout itself, will show you the setbacks to the property line, 37 feet on that corner, and setback, let's see, where's my front? Oh, there we go. And 73.6 feet to the front. So there's your layout, and you can see how we stay out of that 100-foot buffer with a retaining wall to keep that grade in. And that was important to us to kind of keep the construction contained as tight as we can get it. The next sheet we have is the grading sheet. Again, we talked about the 130 elevation at Blue Hill Avenue, and it slopes down to the elevation, which was, I believe it was 90 over in this location. But we're not even going to come close to this area here. I'd say the gradient itself, as far as fitting the building in and getting the driveway around, we're meeting the grades as best we can on the side slopes to minimize construction on these particular sides. You're looking at I believe it's a 5% slope as we come down this driveway here, and it flattens out here. The access into the building itself at elevation 126.5 kind of matches the contour in this location. You can see the 126 here. So we're trying to match grades and keep the grades in the front as best as possible to allow the existing trees to remain with minimal amount of damage to the roots. As we slope down here, your largest amount of fill is in this particular location. You'll see that this wall, which basically is about 2 to 4 feet as it runs down to here, and then it gets into this tight gradient, right, in this particular location where you see we're holding this 14 down to 12 here, while this drops off from 14 all the way down to, looks like 106. So the wall here is going to increase in height to about 8 feet, and then we'll lose it quickly on this 3-to-1 slope as we fill against the slope that exists out on the property currently. The next sheet we have is the utility sheet. You have utilities, water and the gas coming over in this particular location. You have the sewer going out the back. And you have the power and communications coming in overhead to a utility pole, to a surface transformer, and then into the building. That particular situation exists right now. There is a utility pole, I'd say maybe right around this particular location, and then the existing home is also fed underground from a utility pole in the front yard. As far as the water goes, right now we're showing a 4-inch domestic line and a 6-inch fire protection line, tapping an existing 6-inch line that was installed in 1927. I had heard that the town is looking us to connect to the 12-inch water main located across the street. They're both part of the high pressure system. The 12-inch water main, I think, was installed a year later, 1928. They're both cast iron. I think the town is probably looking to get some volume behind it by connecting to the 12-inch anyway. So I don't think we necessarily have a problem with that. It's just right now the existing service is connected to the 6, so we propose to do the same. But I don't think connecting to the 12 would be that much of a concern. Gas line, existing main here with a gas service coming in to provide gas service for the building. And again, overhead electrical service to here to a transformer here. Utility purveyors like the gas companies and the electrical company, they'll have some input with regards to the final design And we can certainly get into the nuts and bolts of that in the future. As far as the SOAR goes, the existing SOAR is a little unusual. There's an existing SOAR service that runs from Delphi Academy across the property, with no really known easement, but it's there nonetheless. And what we're proposing to do is connect to it here with a underground drainage, underground SOAR system for area drains for the garage, as well as the domestic line that'll connect to this line as well, and connect to Meeting House Lane. This is the existing SOAR manhole that we pretty much located both, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's an exact straight line, but we just kind of connected the dots with regards to how this SOAR fits. If you look at the existing conditions plan, you'll see as we connect the dots, it goes right underneath the carriage house. That may or may not be true, but the SOAR line itself is certainly an acceptable source for a SOAR connection. Now I can guess that, the big item tonight is about the drainage. The site right now has, I think, 4 catch basins on it, trench drain and the like, with pipes leading into it from other catch basins and I believe from the house itself. I've never been able to find the outlets, but when I was out there on last Saturday, and I had the opportunity to watch it drain, and it drains pretty well, which suggests the system is operating in good condition. I would think that given that, we would also be able to do the same. So what we're proposing is a pair of catch basins for the front roadway to capture the runoff before it passes through this intersection of the parking lot, and a catch basin here to catch the parking lot and put it through a deep sump manhole, which provides some water quality treatment, and put it to another manhole that would disperse it through this recharge system. This particular recharge system is a 5x12 Cultec chamber system that has 330s, which is basically a HDPE arch open bottom structure that connects together with ribs, and it's about 2.5 feet high, and I want to say about maybe just under 4 feet wide. It's a large structure. It's one of the largest ones, and also one of the most popular sale items, because you get a lot of bang for your buck with the volume and the ease of putting it together, HB and HDPE. Down underneath the building, I am proposing a larger one, which takes care of the roof, including the courtyard, as well as the drive that connects up the stormwater through these catch basins here and here. The deep sump catch basin manholes also have a snout specified on the plan, which is a proprietary water quality hood. And if you look at their data, it provides a significant amount of suspended solids removal. The way this system works is that it fills up, and actually it'll overflow in this particular location here for the 100-year event. And I'll get into the storm events in a bit. This curb here is, it spills over the curb for, I think, maybe an inch on the 100-year event. So the 100-year event will fill up to elevation 112 and spill over the top of that curb. Now, as far as the drainage goes, and I know Mr. O'Brien had some questions last night with regards to the storm events. We're required to buffer for the and treat the 2, the 10, the 25, and 100-year storm events. Those events translate into the 2-year is 3.41 inch depth of rain. The 10 is a 5.35 inch depth of rain. The 25 is 6.52, and the 100-year is 8.37 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. Now, those are from the National Oceanic the NOAA precipitation rainfall frequency curves, and they're interpolated for the specific area, and you can actually get it right down to the lot in Milton, Massachusetts for that particular rainfall event, using those curves that are available nationally. You take that rainfall event and you put it through a type 3 frequency storm that is established by the Soil Conservation Service TR20 methodology for hydrology. And that's been established by the National Engineering Handbook. I believe that was published in, like 1945, I believe. There's a lot of history behind the stormwater management and where it actually is today. It's come a long way, and the rainfall events that we used to use have increased based on recent studies, global warming and the like. So we're using the most recent rainfall events to design these systems. The next set of plans that we have really just kind of relate to construction details. You're looking at sewer cleanouts, and this is an oil water separator here, and erosion control barrier here. This is a catch basin insert for construction. Kind of the nuts and bolts to allow a contractor to put together a price for, to really define what kind of structure am I using. You have the deep sump manhole right here. Here's your Cultec chamber system with crushed stone that provides the storage underneath either the paved surface or, for that matter, the building. So I'd say that is the civil site engineering plans. I can go through the calculations specifically with regards to the flow events.
Why don't you hold on that, Jim, and let's get some questions and conversation going. I know that you were right, that I think there was a significant amount of interest in stormwater flow, offsite in particular. So
right.
I think we can get a conversation going, and perhaps you can discuss the calculations at that point. Is that acceptable?
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out how to stop sharing here.
No, well, that's okay. I'm going to have some questions, and it'll be good to share. So
Okay.
with respect to the plan. So here's what I like to propose, similar to last night. I'm going to ask the members if they've got questions. I've got questions, and I'd like to ask those, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Hill and his team if they've got questions, and then I'll open it up to the floor. I want to acknowledge for everybody. Hang on a second. Mr. Stephen Howard, who I know is in the audience. He sent us an email this afternoon and some photographs. So I want to show people the photos, and then perhaps I want to have Mr. Howard discuss the photos since he took them. So I want to just let people know that we're going to do that. And then I expect that the neighbors will have questions on the offsite and Mr. Howard in particular. So that's coming up. So, and it's along the lines of the questions we asked last night of you, Mr. Burke. But let me start at the top, if that's okay. This set of plans is dated December 31st, 2019, and it's stamped and signed. Does that mean that these are final?
No, and in fact, if you look here, we actually had a revision date of 5/5/20 for the Milton ZBA filing. So that they're stamped as we authorize them to be presented
Okay.
for permit. That's all.
Is all of the work that we would consider site civil or civil engineering that you're proposing to do, with the exception of the sewer connection to Meeting House Lane, within the limits of the site?
You do have the connections to the
State Highway.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, you know, the as shown on this particular plan, you can see this double line right here represents the erosion control, a silt fence, if you will, and we have. We did not stake the limit of work. We did stake the center line of the proposed roadway and the corners of the proposed building. So you'll see how that fits within this particular envelope, if you will. So there's no proposed work other than, even the sewer connections being connected up top here. But the only thing really outside the property line will be the utility connections in this location here.
I see. So the physical connection or the connection of the sewer at Meeting House Lane isn't a physical connection. You're just taking advantage of the fact that there's a sewer there.
That is correct.
But you also said there's no easement?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. That sewer is probably older than I am. So the fact that it exists in that particular location, providing a service for an abutter, it'd be my personal belief that it's kind of prescriptive, that it's providing a service. The current owner knows it's there. It's not like you can go and dig it up and cap it because it's on your property. That's my understanding of it.
We're going to probe that a little bit more. I just wanted, you don't know that I can't see the property owner's name now, formerly Dorothy Munson, is it? Huston, yeah, Dorothy. Okay, so I'm interested in that issue. I know that was also an issue that the town raised, but let me ask you, can you bring the plan back up to Route 138? You said you located the curb cuts. Do you
Yes,
actually have the permit from MassDOT on those curb cuts? I know
no,
that's probably been there for a long time.
for the proposed ones or for the existing?
The existing.
That's a good question. The curb cuts exist. I think they probably have the same rights as the sewer, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. With I've heard and I saw in the application that the applicant is going to use the existing curb cuts. It begs the question as to whether or not we know where the existing curb cuts are. I mean, I know where they physically are. I'm wondering where they've been permitted to be. So the question, go ahead. I'm interested in whether there's a valid permit off the state highway to access the property, and if so, can the applicant provide it? And then secondly, is the applicant proposing to get a new permit from MassDOT to recognize the change in use and the modification of the driveway?
Absolutely. That is a requirement from
So
MassDOT.
you'll be making an application to MassDOT for a new highway access permit?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us what the distance is from the edge of the state highway to the current building? What's the current setback?
To the existing building?
Yeah.
Don't have it there. Let me check to see if I have it.
Well, what I'm interested in is how much closer is the building going to be to the road than it currently is?
Let me check the there's a zoning chart right here. So front yard, so now I just have required. I don't have existing,
Okay.
but I can certainly get you that information.
You can get that to us. I mean, it somewhat speaks to the massing that we spoke about yesterday. The building, you know, I mean, I think to a casual observation of this property makes it feel like maybe the building is going to be around where the current building is, but it's actually much closer. And I just want to scale that off and just get a better sense of the actual dimension of that. Let's see. Oh, well, I have two more questions. So you mentioned, I think when you were showing this sketch, this plan, or maybe the next one, that you've marked the trees for removal.
Yes.
What are the criteria for, I mean, obviously, when a building is going to occupy the site, you have to take the tree down. But what are your other criteria for taking trees down and saving trees? Is there a bias towards saving trees, or is it good to remove the trees so it's easier to build? What are you thinking on that?
You know, to tell you the truth, as far as
Well, you are telling us the truth, right?
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
good.
of course, but if it's within the footprint and within the limit of work, the tree is generally going to be removed. Now, that certainly is dependent upon grading and the like. So we are marking these trees as probably a good indication, the fact that these are coming out because of the building being constructed as well as the parking lot in that particular area. So,
I mean, this may be an area that overlaps with the landscape architecture and the presentation we heard last night, but you've heard from the members of the board and from the neighbors that people are concerned about screening. So I'd like to ask the applicant if every reasonable effort has been made to save as many trees on that property as possible and to replicate those same trees as nearly as possible to the extent practicable. So rather than, I mean, I don't know that there's a system here of preservation with the bias towards preservation, with the idea that that screening is critical from a local need, local interest perspective.
The way I would answer that is that as far as the screening goes, it's really kind of, you're right, is the landscape architect to come up with a scenario that allows for the building to be in development itself to be screened from the neighbors. As far as oops, let me go again. I mean, you know, here are the trees that we're proposing to save. There really isn't any significant trees over on this particular edge, but we're saving trees here and right along the front. As far as, you know, the grading, as discussed earlier, it was really a goal to kind of maintain the grades as much as possible. I think when it's all said and done, I think this is a cut site. We're going to end up being, we'll be filling this edge to allow this driveway to be graded as shown. But for the most part, I mean, you're looking at some fill removal to install the underground garage up in the front here, and less earthworks here. And that was really kind of the focus of the design request from the applicant, is to kind of minimize the grading on the edges as much as possible to keep the earthworks down and the trees on the edges viable as much as possible.
Okay. I have two more questions. I'm going to ask my colleagues to ask questions. What is the wall made out of?
This one here?
Yeah.
You know, right now I'm showing it as just a double line. My guess, my suggestion would be one of the small masonry block walls held together with a geotextile fabric and pins. There are several options available, even for the large block precast concrete walls that with a cut face. They're really popular now. But I think honestly, in this particular use and location, with such a small portion of it being 8 feet high, I think the small block would be more appropriate. The other alternative is really, a poured in place concrete wall, which, I don't think it would be, too aesthetic. So so I would say, I don't know, but my guess is that it's going to be a decorative and aesthetic precast concrete block.
Okay. Last question. Do you have a plan that shows where the gardens are?
Yes, the existing.
No, I know you have a plan. Let me ask you a different way. I'm interested in a plan showing where the gardens are with the improvements on it. I want to understand where the gardens are in light of where the improvements are.
On the site walk, I have generated a plan, and I don't have it available tonight, but I do have the existing conditions plan.
Can you put that on there?
The existing conditions plan's right here, and I don't. All I have is hard copies of the plan that we're going to be using for the site walk. But it shows the building footprint on the lot, as well as the drive. So you can have an idea when we're walking around, when you'll see what the points represent. We also have on that plan the point numbers that are numbered on the stakes as well. So you'll be able to orientate yourself very easily.
There's been a lot of attention put to the gardens, and I'm interested in seeing a drawing that shows the improvements with respect to the gardens.
Okay.
And we talked last night, I think Ms. Joffer had asked if there's been an alternatives analysis done with respect to the gardens. So that's an area that I don't think we completely understand when we don't understand the extent of it and the work that's been done with respect to the alternatives. I'm also going to make a comment later in the hearing when Mr. Schomer arrives about a peer review of that issue, just given its significance, its relationship to local need and the interest that's been expressed by the neighbors. So that concludes my comments. Let me ask Ms. Joffer if she's got any comments or questions that she would like to ask Mr. Burke. Ms. Joffer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Burke, for your presentation. It's very clear and helpful. I have a question about soil erosion, and I guess in part I'm just hoping you can talk a little bit more about it, because you mentioned that there's the erosion barrier, and I know sort of trees are being removed, and there's already this fairly steep grade. So what are the risks of erosion and how are they being prevented or mitigated?
The risk for erosion is limited, despite the slope. And the slope isn't that significant where it can't be controlled. There are different types of methodologies with regards to erosion control and also minimizing the off-site sediment transport from outside this limit of work. I mean, that's what this represents. It's kind of the last line of defense for erosion control. And it'll be very important and maintained daily, really, just to make sure that this line remains intact and not stressed, because over time it collects up sediment, puts a little stress on the fabric, and if you don't maintain it, it'll end up breaking and breaking through and the like. So by filing a SWIP permit and by filing this construction management plan, that the contractor will be responsible for maintaining soils on his site, whether they're being brought in a stockpile area, or for that matter, excavated out and stockpiled on site. The contractor ultimately is responsible to make sure that that site during construction remains steadfast with regards to no erosion impacting abutting properties, and for that matter, outside the limit of work.
Thank you. No further questions from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Mr. Burke, and thank you for a very informative, well-done presentation, as usual. So appreciate that. I too want to spend a little time in the sewer with you on this. It kind of be blunt, seems kind of sketchy that kind of through the back. I mean, what exactly do we know about location, condition, stuff like that? What's been done to by way of inspection or anything like that?
With respect to soils, with respect to structure, and
well, I'm talking about the sewer and back with the lack of an easement and whatnot. It just believe
it or not, it's not that unusual in Milton. You head over to Brush Hill Road with some of the older estates where I remember finding drain lines running for thousands of feet from the top of the corner of Highland and on Harlan Street. I forget the owner's name. But you would, and I forget the development as well. But there are drain lines and sewer lines without easements throughout Milton. They've certainly, as Milton's become more developed and subdivided off significantly in the 80s and 90s, a lot of those situations didn't exist anymore. But if you look at the way this has set up, this sewer here providing service for this particular structure runs right down to Meeting House Lane. My guess is that as they expanded this and the septic system failed, that they found out, okay, there's a sewer over in Meeting House Lane, let's make this particular connection, and they made a deal with this guy. It's, I wouldn't call it sketchy. I'd call it, a grateful neighbor provided a service to another neighbor is what I'd call it. It's not that unusual.
Does it have, I assume it has sufficient capacity to handle a significantly larger structure that's being proposed?
The thing about that is that you'd be surprised how much a 6-inch conduit at call it a 4% slope. And I don't know the volume off the top of my head, but it's capable of handling the peak flow for 118 units. The sewer mains back in the day, they used to be 6-inch. Now they upgraded them to the minimum's 8-inch. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I'll tell you, I think sometimes when you create a larger pipe for flows that aren't designed for a larger pipe, the cleaning efficiencies of the solids for that particular pipe are diminished. And I've had this conversation with several public works directors and engineers and the like, but they've set their minimums, and plumbing codes are sometimes different than civil site engineering codes. But in the end, the sewer line from Meeting House Lane certainly is sufficient to handle that additional flow. And the other thing too, and I was thinking about this because I had to figure, I thought this might come up. You have this sewer manhole here, the top of the manhole. You're at elevation 121. Now, I certainly can't get the garage flow. We're required to put in area drains for garage flow in case of a ruptured tank or oil spill or whatever. And those area drains tie into an oil water separator, which once that's installed, that needs to be connected to a sewer, not a drain line. So that sewer line, and those flow very infrequently. So the flow out of an oil water separator, even out of a 160 space parking lot, is minimal and de minimis. In a pinch, I certainly can get the first floor at 126.5 to flow across the street and connect up to the domestic sewer to the 121.7 if the capacity is considered, if there's a capacity concern for Meeting House Lane. So I think the capacity issues for sewer are a minimal concern for this particular project. I believe the water supply also with a 12-inch main with the allowances to connect to that also kind of is not a concern for this. I'd say given the concerns raised by the neighbors with regards to drainage, I'd say stormwater is the biggest concern for this particular project, given the gradient of the slope as it slopes down towards Meeting House Lane and to a single family residential neighborhood in the area. I'd say that's the big concern, and I'm prepared to design something that alleviates those concerns. I think I talk too much, and and if you have any other questions, I'll certainly answer them.
I do have one or two other questions, but I'm wondering if the chairman might have a question.
You have a question, and it's a question to just follow up on what Mr. Burke just said, and that is, I heard you say that the stormwater is an issue, and that you're confident you can design something to accommodate the stormwater. And then last night we talked about the same issue, and I think I asked if you thought that there was going to be any exacerbation of the conditions on neighboring properties. I think the answer was no. I wonder if you could share with us the steps that have been taken to control the water on the site now, recognizing that at a point later in the hearing, we're going to hear from the neighbors about the situation, particularly down gradient, the people who are below the site are having with water. So maybe you can speak to the steps you're taking to control that water on site.
Certainly. Well, the steps that we're taking is we're creating recharge basins for the site, two of them that are large, they're significantly large. I want to say they're 5,000.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Brien.
Just jargon alert. I may be an amateur civil engineer as much as I'm an amateur architect, so bear with us. So when you say recharge, what does that mean to the average person?
I'd say leaching pit.
Okay.
Can you put the plan up that shows where
Sure.
where this is?
Yep.
Thank you.
Right here. So you have the one recharge system here, one recharge system here.
Okay.
Now, they are, let's see if I don't have them dimensioned, do I? So you excavate out the loam and the subsoil in this particular area, you level it off until you get into the soils that we found on site. Now, the soils we found on site were sands and loamy sands, which I consider to be A soils.
Again, what's an A soil?
An A soil is, you have four families of soils, hydrological group soils that define runoff off the property. So an A soil is like sand and gravel, so water percolates it through very quickly. You have a B soil, which is just underneath that, and so it's got a little bit of silt in it, but it doesn't run through it at less than, like a Cape Cod sand, if you will. If you're walking on the beach. So it's got a little bit of silt to it. It has a little bit of stiffness to it. Then you have a sea soil, which has a lot more silt in it. A sea soil is a tough soil. You'll find that over at the Hillside Street and over by the Forest and Harland. Those soils over there are tough. And it's just a lot of silt, tightly compact, and difficult for water to drain through. Then you have D soils, which is basically like a wetland soil, a clay, and water does not go through it whatsoever. In this particular instance, we're fortunate to have, which I believe is A soils, the Soil Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA, went across the country and dug holes everywhere and mapped out the country with regards to what type of soils they felt fit that particular family. They mapped this area as a B soil, and they call it a family of Canton, which is fairly typical throughout Northeast Massachusetts, for that matter, Eastern Massachusetts. So this allows you to design a recharge system and provide it what they call an infiltration rate, a Rawls rate. And this is all in the stormwater management standards guidelines book. And I may not agree with it. I feel sometimes that it ends up being very Betty Crockerish. It limits the design capabilities of an engineer to put a system that he can stand behind and stamp where it has to meet these standard criteria. And that's what we're doing for these systems. We're putting them through the stormwater management design guidelines and standards, requirements really, and to generate these systems that handle the 2, the 10, and 25 and 100-year storm events. So this particular system, for example, it actually captures this driveway in this parking lot in the front yard. So the watershed for this particular recharge system is it's not that big. And you can see that, it's actually a considerable amount, percentage of area for that particular watershed. And it's got some depth to it in a sense that it's 2.5 feet deep with a 6-inch stone bed underneath that. So you get a 3-foot sandwich sitting under here that is fed stormwater. Now, as you feed the stormwater in here, the bottom, the Rawls rate, which is the recharge rate, allows the water to disappear through the bottom of this particular recharge system. We're required to do this as part, I believe it's standard 3 for the 10 stormwater standards requirements that we have to comply to for recharge. Now, we analyzed this particular one for the 100-year event. The 100-year volume for this is contained within this system completely. So you'll never see any water come out over the curb or anything like that on the surface. Everything will go right through the bottom of this particular system. Now, this system is a little bit different. It's larger, but if you look at the area that it's contributed to, you'll see that it includes this entire roof as well as this drive and this drive. And percentage-wise, it's probably a little bit smaller than this one. The 100-year event for this particular system, it actually fills up. So the water will come down and actually pond on top of this low spot right here. And it'll pond up to fill the curb, a 6-inch curb, and pass over the top of that curb like a weir. And we've modeled that in the HydroCAD, which will be reviewed by at least 2 engineers, and they'll tell me, what they think of it, and I'm prepared to answer those questions as well at some point. And so the 100-year event spills over that curb at a less rate than it does when the storm water comes, 8 inches of rainfall comes across the property and down gradient to Meeting House Lane. So it's these ponds that we divert water to during every storm event that buffers and protects the people down gradient of this property. How is that?
Excellent. How are, okay, so I'm a homeowner. By the way, I have one of those hidden sewers going through my neighborhood as well, so I'm not totally unfamiliar with them. But okay, so my experience with drainage is if I don't take the leaves out of my my gutters, then my gutters overflow and I've got problems and everything else. What kind of maintenance is needed for these recharge systems?
Excellent question. We're also required as part of the stormwater management standards is to generate an operation and maintenance program to maintain these systems. The same goes for, the catch basins out on Mass Highway, with regards to the leaf and sediment collection. The operation and maintenance plan for this particular system is looked at these structures on a quarterly basis. So you'll be in there looking at the catch basins to see if they need cleaning. They recommend cleaning when the sediment, I believe, is halfway filled in the sump, and the sump is itself 4 feet deep. So when you have 2 feet of sediment, you call up the vacuum truck and you have them clean out this sump. But if they're just going to clean out this one, they're going to end up doing all of them. There'll be observation ports for both systems here. Well, you'll be able to inspect the bottom of the stone, see if there's any ponding in these systems, which would suggest the start of failure. There is there's street sweeping programs that can be implemented. The water quality tanks they have that I propose, the deep sumps that the peer review and I review engineers and I will get into conversations about in the near future. Do the same thing as these catch basins. They take particles offline, but they also do oil and hydrocarbon cleaning as well. So it is. You're absolutely right. The thing is that you're required to do the maintenance of these systems, and honestly, the private buildings that I've found under private management do a lot better job of it than a lot of others. And the thing is, you're required to submit these reports. I think in Milton, they go to the engineering department with regards to it, because they have that stormwater management bylaw, that does the same thing. It's conservation started this whole thing, the Wetlands Protection Act, and it used to be the Conservation Commission that would have if you didn't have wetlands on your property and you didn't have to file, you didn't do this stuff. And now it's kind of mandated by the planning board, and there's a lot of overlap now, which is fine. But stormwater management has come a long way since I've started.
Can we talk a little bit about snow management? Clearly, looking at this, we've got a lot of parking spaces that are going to be undercover. We've talked a lot about storm water flow and stuff like that. What about snow? What's the snow removal plan? Is there a snow storage area? Where, what kind of impact would melting snow have on drainage issues?
You know, the snow storage for this particular site is better than most. You have this whole area in here where you can put it up gradient and have it captured by this catch basin here. It's a little more difficult with regards to clearing the snow in this particular area because you'd end up storing it on the down gradient slope where it would go uncontrolled off site without being captured by the catch basins and that are located within the roadway itself. But at the same time, the snow melt is certainly not like, 8 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. The snow melt is typically slow and steady, and drainage systems are typically capable, no matter how old they are, of handling that style of flow. But in this particular, like I said earlier, in this particular site, there's a significant amount of snow storage areas for the impervious areas. And I tell you, there's not a lot of impervious management for this site, given that I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's just under 20,000 square feet of pavement for this lot. The rest of it, the parking lot itself is all under roof, which will end up being, melted and captured in the roof drains and sent to this particular system.
While we're talking snow, any concerns or thought about impact of de-icing, snow removal chemicals on the plantings, that sort of thing? The different types of salt have always been controversial. The thing about using the chemicals, it's one's not better than the other that I find. It's actually about using the correct amount, and and that comes down to management and then knowledge. If you use the right amount, it's not going to hurt the plant species or create an environmental hazard. The only way that happens is if you use too much of anything, whether it be calcium chloride or, for that matter, sodium chloride or whatever else. There could be a point where you wouldn't even need to use the salt in this particular instance, where you can just use sand. The gradients aren't, I think, that significant where a lot of salt would be needed to be used. Just my opinion. Last question, from a site civil point of view, is this a challenging site, or is this kind of not especially challenging? It does have the slope, yet I got the impression that the slope, while figuring in your thinking as you would expect, not a huge challenge.
To answer that question quickly, no. I mean, I look at the site and I'll be honest with you, I'd change some things right now. I look at it and I could have done some things better. And I'm not saying I won't, but that I'm just critiquing my own work as I sit here tonight. But there's I think, maybe some alterations to the stormwater controls that I could make, particularly to the rear, that would make the situation a little bit better. But to answer your question, no, it wasn't really that difficult. The gradient actually helps a little bit for collection. But I'd say the biggest spot on this particular job is, yeah, I'd say the size of this system right here. I might split that up into two instead of having one big one. I'd say that's about what I'd like to do.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think I should give somebody else a shot.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Our consultant, Judy Barrett, is not with us tonight, so I'd like to ask, I see Caitlin Baptiste. Is it Baptiste?
Hi, Caitlin Baptista.
Caitlin Baptista. Okay, well, welcome to the board. I know you work with Mr. Hill and you're a representative representing the Vos Hill Neighborhood Association. So welcome to the Board of Appeal. And I'd like to invite you to ask questions of the applicant or ask any of your clients to ask questions of the applicant at your option. Welcome.
Great, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
actually did have one question, and then if you would like, we do have our civil engineer, John Chessa, here as well, if you'd like to hear from him now.
We would. That would be great.
Great. So I just had one question about the larger infiltration basin system B. You stated that there would be observation ports to observe whether there were any signs of failure. And I was wondering if you could just describe further what those observation ports look like, and if there are signs of failure, if there's a way to access the infiltration system to make any repairs or maintenance needed.
Sure. The infiltration port would be probably a 6-inch PVC pipe that comes out of the top of the Cultec chamber. I might actually have one. There we go. So it's basically inspection port. You have this Nina is a cast iron fitting that would extend down and provide an H20 protection for this particular PVC cap. And you'd pop the cap and you could send down a camera, take a peek, or maybe just, put in a measuring stick and see if there's water down there, or flashlight or whatever. Now, if it comes to a point where there is standing water, my particular preference would be that you'd vacuum truck it out and see if you could, if there's any sort of sediment that you could see as well. And then come back after another rainfall event and see if the same thing has occurred. And if it's continuous, the only real way to fix it is to tear it right back up and replace it. So that's the unfortunate aspects of it. That's why design and installation is important.
So would that require tearing up the entire garage level?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had. So if the board is okay with that, at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Chessa to present.
Okay.
Mr. Posey? Oh, Mr. Chesia, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yes.
Welcome to the board.
Thank you. I guess I'd just like to go through a few of my comments, some of the issues I think that, the neighbors are concerned about, and, issues with the design that I think need, sorry, I'm losing my headset. Some of the design issues that I think may need some more vetting or investigation. And I'll try to be fairly quick if I can, because I know it's already been a lengthy period. But so initially it was discussed how there's existing catch basins and they seem to work, but there's no indication of where anything goes. And sometimes you want to know that so that you can have a understanding of existing to proposed conditions comparison. And it also, if there's a pipe going in some location that might be affecting a neighbor, it could be of benefit for them to know that it's going to be removed or not removed, or how that's going to work. So I know he hasn't been able to find anything, but usually you can find where the catch basins, if they have a pipe or if they don't have a pipe, if they're infiltrating into the ground, that's a base condition that's worth knowing. So I think that's something that typically is done and should be done. If you, maybe Jim could flip to the grading plan.
Sure.
Thank you. So I guess they don't show on this plan, but I guess they're on the existing. But anyway, from what I read in the report, there were only 3 test pits dug, and all of them were basically below the road, proposed road, in the lower part of the site. None of them are underneath any of the systems. So if you look at the limit of work, is pretty much down here around this woods line. And there's 3 test pits, one on the left side of the screen, and then one sort of in the middle, and then one up, sort of on the other side of the sewer. The test pits had what appeared to be maybe almost 2 feet of sand over some less permeable material. And groundwater indicators, the one on the left was about 4 feet, and the other 2 were around 5 feet below grade. So that would indicate, obviously, to anyone looking at it, that the water table's probably 4 or 5 feet below grade. I mean, it's not a flat water table, or there'd be water all breaking out the slope on the neighboring houses, because it's more than a 4-foot drop or a 5-foot drop from those test pits down, just looking at the grading. So if you have a 4 to 5 foot groundwater depth, then the proposed systems would be well into the groundwater, and they wouldn't work. They'd fill up with water from the groundwater to start. So I think one of the main things that I am going to maybe see as I go through this is you need more tests. You need tests directly where the systems are proposed to see what you have for soils where the systems are proposed. That's in the DEP handbook. It's kind of standard practice. You need to know what's there. I mean, one of them is way up front here. The elevation in the front is, almost 15 feet or more higher than the ones down in the back. And looking at the soil map for the area on the other side of Blue Hill Ave was a different soil type, typical of like a glacial drumlin, which is not as good of a material. And it looked like there's, depending upon where they dug the hole, those areas can vary by quite a bit. I know Jim's dug a lot of holes, as have I, and sometimes you dig a hole in one spot, you move over 30 feet, and it's quite different. So to say that these are going to function as proposed without having a single hole underneath any of them puts a lot of risk on this whole design. The next point I'd make is that in the application, there was a request for relief or a waiver from the town's bylaw, which would mean if that bylaw were waived, that there would be no reporting required to the DPW. And the bylaw is in place because of EPA's federal requirements for stormwater management by the town under the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES. So I would recommend that the board not consider giving that waiver on that particular bylaw. That would make the stormwater management system, obviously, we know it's a big issue. Nobody would have hired me if it wasn't. And waiving that bylaw sort of takes any of the power of the board away to require them to abide by all of these requirements.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about that. Thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Chesia. The board, and I know I believe Mr. Burke has been involved in at least one project that I've been involved with as a member of the board that required an independent reporting reporting obligation to the town because of a concern about soils, and not exactly the same kind of issue we have here. But I did make a note here that I wanted to ask the applicant whether or not it thought that this type of maintenance regime along the lines of what Mr. O'Brien was probing would mandate an independent reporting requirement to make certain that the maintenance regime was being adhered to. I wonder, Mr. Burke, if you can speak to that.
Well, I would think it's pretty important for being able to provide maintenance records for an essential piece of infrastructure that allows a property to be developed. So I would recommend that the report be the property management and owner would be responsible for maintaining and reporting the efficiencies of that of the system.
Okay.
It's kind of written in the stormwater management guidelines. The operation and maintenance plan is there for a reason. If they didn't implement these types of reporting, they would only doing themselves a disfavor, and because then your systems are going to end up failing, and you just have to spend money and to replace them. It's shorter money to pay, $1,000 every quarter to have someone come in and inspect and pump out the catch basins and the like. So I can't really speak to with regards to who that they would report to, given the request for waiver, but I certainly can discuss it and answer a little more clearly to that specific nature of your question at a future date.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chesia.
Okay. If you could flip back to that grading sheet, please, I would use that to help discuss some of the next ones. So if you look at the front of the building here, the proposed front of the building, the existing grade is basically about 127. There's a 120 existing wise. The 128 goes through the parking lot, and the 126 is just, off the front line of the building. They're 2-foot contours. And then the slab is at 114.5. So you're talking, over a 12-foot cut for the slab in the front. So if you have water 4 to 5 feet below grade, which is more than likely the case as you go uphill, maybe it's a little bit more, but probably not substantially, you would be well into the water table with your basement, which means that you'd end up having to put some sort of waterproofing, yet generally foundation drains, etc. Meanwhile, you got an infiltration system about 12 feet off this foundation, which groundwater is going to tend to follow the grade of the land going down the hill right up against the basement, which is going to create a problem. I mean, I scaled it to be 12 feet off the foundation, and the setback for a subsurface system, it's kind of hard to judge because it's not really listed. Trench drains, which they kind of mimicked, it's a lot further than 12 feet, but the minimum is greater than 10 feet. And generally, you might want to see how's that going to impact it. The lower system is an 8-foot cut to get to it. That side's not as much because that's sort of where the existing house and all that developed area is. But even still, if you have a 5-foot to water table, you're going to be in the water table. You're certainly not going to have enough separation for the thing to work properly. And one of the recommendations, I guess I didn't have it in my letter directly, but as I've been reviewing for this meeting, the board may want to get a cross section through the lot that takes you right from maybe property line at Brew Hill Ave, through the drainage system, through the foundation, through the other drainage system, and out the back with test pits to show what you have there for water table and stuff. If more test pits are required or are performed as they should be required, I recommend that the board have someone from the town, maybe your peer consultant, observe them, just so that everybody's covered as to what's been observed, and you know what you have. I don't think it's going to work based on the information that we have. I could be proven wrong. If you dig a hole in 20 feet and there's no signs of water and it's pure sand, that'd be a different story. But it doesn't seem likely given what we've seen and what's been reported. So there's a pretty serious question that this is going to work at all if you ask me about it. But anyway, to go through My next piece sort of talks about this 10 standards, and I know Jim talked about them a bit. And some of them I think aren't that big of an issue, but the three that mostly concern, and maybe 4 or 5 actually are of most concern. One would be runoff rate. Everybody that lives downstream is concerned that the runoff rate, you increase the runoff, all of a sudden I got more water. I got more water in my basement. I got more water in my yard. I'm sure you hear these things all the time. If you don't, I know I do. But anyway, if these things don't work from an infiltration perspective, then you got to have an increase in runoff rate. And the soils haven't been proven to know that they work. And the evidence we do have would indicate that they're in the water table. And if they're already in the water table, they tend not to absorb any more. If anything, they'd be full, so they wouldn't have the volume to work. The other thing is, for the building one, I don't think it's allowed because it's too close to a slab, it's too close to a foundation, and it's subject to the plumbing code. There's nothing in the plumbing code that talks anything about having a drainage system under your building. Anything within the building, 10 feet out, plumbing code. I don't think you can do it. But somebody else may say you can, but I have found nothing that says that you can. So that affects your runoff rate. It also affects your recharge, because if you can't put it there, you lose all that recharge. I mean, this building area is like 65% of the impervious area on the lot that's being taken care of. So if you can't recharge it under the building, they'd have to put it down in the back slope here, which could be tricky because there's pretty good pitch and the water table's not that deep. The other aspect of this big building is, how do you get the water from the building into it? It's like, oh, it's going to drain into it, but does it drain into it? Does it have gutters and downspouts? Are they going to take the flow, or is it just going to blow off the edge and not get in? There's no information on that whatsoever. There's really not any information on the system under the garage other than a box that says we think it'll work here. Lastly, on the next one was treatment of the runoff. You just got to clean it up. These deep sump manholes that were listed, they're not a BMP at all. They're not listed in the handbook. They're just something that's pretty much made up. They wouldn't work anyway because they're in line with other systems. So they shouldn't be, they don't give you any credit whatsoever. And again, if we don't have the soils, we don't have the separation, we don't get the treatment from the soil for the recharge system. So that's a problem. In my opinion, I think it needs to be addressed. And that's pretty, I think this whole soil thing is probably the single most serious issue with this design, because we really don't know what we got. And based on what we do know, it won't work. The board had questions on the construction. This is a pretty major excavation if you think about it. You got a 12-foot cut up here. It's probably over an acre of building. That's a lot of dirt to move. You got to dig the big holes for these underground systems. You got to pile it up or truck it away. It's going to be either a lot of trucks or a big pile. And you're right, completely surrounded by houses that people live in, or a school looks like. And the land slopes away on every side to everybody else's property. A silt fence may not take care of it if you get a big rainstorm on a big stockpile of raw soil. I think that needs to be looked at very carefully. It will need a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And I think that if the board ever gets to dealing with this further in terms of approvals or anything, if you ought to require that the SWIP gets submitted and approved before it goes any further into construction, because that's a big potential issue. I don't think it's should be taken quite as lightly as it was taken on this, because the impacts of having a whole bunch of dirt wash into somebody's yard in an area like this where people have nice houses, well-maintained lawns, is something I think you really got to look at. And as was discussed, so the system under the garage, if you decide that it's okay to do it, although I don't see anywhere that it's allowed or meets any requirements. So the answer is, if it plugs up, you got to dig up the whole garage. I mean, how practical is that? I mean, you got to think about it. If it doesn't fit, if the whole crux of this design bases on something being underneath the building, it just seems crazy to me. I mean, there must be other ways to do it to get something to work, but that's pretty much what, I have, and I know I sent the letter to Dan. I believe he provided it to the board, and I had a couple of attachments from the DEP handbook regarding the design of the subsurface structure, some of the requirements for that, and infiltration requirements. A quick note on the subsurface structures, and I don't know that anybody does this, but if you read the DEP handbook, it lists that they are not applicable for peak flow. And if they're not applicable for peak flow, then there's no control whatsoever for peak flow. So, I mean, that's,
We did get your submittal. Thank you. It is on the website for those listening. You can go to our website to see all of the work that's been done. So thank you very much for both that presentation and for the submittal, which we did get from Mr. Hill, from Mr. Hill's office. Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Can I ask Ms. Batista if there's anything, if there anybody else you'd like to recognize from your team?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to be recognized, and just please raise your hand.
Stephen Howard. Allowed to talk?
Yeah, Mr. Burke, can you stop sharing your screen? Mr. Howard, are you with us?
There we go. Mike's on.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Howard, we can't hear you.
His mic is off.
I think there's
I
a
mean,
little-
mic is on.
little
Yeah,
mic there.
yeah, the background. Yeah.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Actually, his mic just went off. Should we go to the second one?
Why don't we do that and we'll come back to Mr. Howard? Thank you, Beth.
Yeah. Okay. All set.
Is that Barbara?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi,
This is Barbara
Hi.
Alavi.
Barbara Alavi. Ms. Alavi, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jim, thanks for your plans. It was good to see a visual as to what's going on up there. And John, thank you. Very informative. Water is a huge issue down here for us on Alfred Road. I live on Alfred Road, Barbara Lane, Meeting House Lane. I have a neighbor that built below the other mansion here and built a huge retaining wall, 200 feet long, about 15 feet high. We had tremendous water issues just from a single family being built. We had floods, we had dirt coming into our yard. I just can't even imagine the scale of this project, just to echo John Cheshia's comments of something like that going up there, the tremendous issues that will happen. In rainfall, as is, we have water flowing down from Brush Hill Avenue like rivers across 138, coming down into our neighborhoods down here. So it's a huge, huge concern, as I mentioned yesterday. So I appreciate all of the work done by John Cheshia. That's very supportive of, I think, all of the neighbors down here. There are some neighbors that have even gone to the extent of putting basement technologies in their houses because of the water issues, to prevent water from coming in. So those are basically my comments.
Thank you
I
very
just
much.
wanted to add some further comments after seeing everything tonight.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Lobby. Appreciate your time and participation.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard. He's definitely got a mic, but he can't be heard.
That's too bad.
I could try promoting him to a panelist to see if that would work.
Do
Is
that.
that okay? Sure.
Give him a raise. As long as you give him a raise.
See, let's find him here. Sorry, guys. Wait a minute. I'm just trying to. Well, let's see if I can do it here.
There he is.
There he is.
Still can't hear him.
No audio, but video is good.
Okay. Let me see if I have an option to
He can
put him on the.
call us.
Yeah.
Maybe he could call in.
Well, if I can. Oh, he's doing notes. Changing computer.
Oh, changing computer. Okay. Robert,
Yeah, because he's not even on the list to promote him.
why don't we
Jeff.
hear from Mr. Lavash?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Sure.
So I will, Steve actually sent me the video of the water. And so maybe I can share that with you. I don't know if he shared it with you, Jeff, this morning. I'm the one who told him to send his videos from his back. But maybe I can share my screen.
Well, let me just explain to folks what we have, what the board's been provided and what will be provided on our website. We've got a series of photographs, but I didn't see any animation, so that was
Okay.
what I was going to share. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Please.
let's see what I can do. Do you guys do you see my screen with the photos? Yes or no?
You see a nice picture of the courthouse in town.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's this screen. You see?
Yeah, there you
Yep. Okay. All right. So these are videos. These two.
go. Oh, okay.
So let's see. It might take a little bit, but let's see.
So can you just explain to us what we're looking at?
So I think Steven's going to have to explain where it is on where he lives and where this is. But obviously it's a lot of water coming down. And so I think he's going to need to explain where exactly his house is in location to the water. But I just wanted to show you the videos, especially if he couldn't, you know. And so that's.
No, maybe, Robert, maybe could you also, just to set this up, would you mind reading that email? Just to give some context to what we're looking at, because he explained
Yeah.
the event.
Yeah. Oh, so he said our house is on Meeting House Lane on the front and Alfred Road on the back. As you can see, a good share of our garden was underwater after that event. This water flowed from our neighbor's garden on the north side, in spite of a stormwater inlet maintained by the town in their yard, into ours, and then into our neighbor's garden on the south side, and flooded Alfred Road, in spite of two stormwater inlets on the street. Also included is a picture of the garden dry for a comparison's sake. Thought this could help illustrate our neighborhood's concerns about drainage and stormwater. So There it is dry down on the bottom. Here it is flooded. It's just another up close. So that kind of gives you this is the second, that's the video we just watched. And I think this is it's another one that's showing the runoff. And I just want to mention one other thing. Where I live up in Brush Hill, my soil is absolute clay. And so I will tell you that the water just runs down my land. So I'm only, obviously I'm on the upside, right? I'm up on Brush Hill Road. But the soil composition is complete clay. And so, I absolutely think there needs to be test pits and we really need a soil analysis here, because there's clearly an issue. And so to say that, that there's sand soils here, I just don't buy it, Jim, sorry. And so I think we need to, we need to test,
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Robert. I wonder if Mr. Howard has joined us.
I don't think he has.
Okay. Let me ask if are you all set, Mr. Lavash?
Yep, I am.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to be recognized by the board? 2 participants. Okay. Bev? Bev, is there anybody who needs to be recognized? If so, could you recognize them?
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute. I didn't see the participants on the right side, but now they're there.
We have one Nick Gobby with talking permitted.
Yeah, and yes, I've got it all right now. The Google screen had to go away. Okay, Nick.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Mr. Garvey, welcome to the board.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate one of the problems I can see as well is concentrating all that water, if it, even assuming it works fantastic and it goes into the pits, concentrating it all in those small spaces and having it come down the hill underground is a problem, because a lot of us on the street have problems with I'd also like to see some tests for the soil here as well, because I don't think it's not sandy down here, and it comes down.
Mr. Gobi, when you say down the street on
I'm on Meeting House Lane. I'm sorry.
What are we talking about?
I'm at 45 Meeting House Lane, and I have water. It comes down the hill, hits my foundation, and comes in. And I've had to put French drains in, and it's been a problem since I moved here.
Which is when?
2012.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I just want to state that. Thank you.
So
we now have.
Let me just. I'm sorry, Mr. Gobi. Let me use you. So you saw the video. Where do you live in comparison to Mr. Howard?
I'm farther up the hill. I'm one house away from the proposed project.
I see. He's further down the street.
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And I'm just curious what the engineers think about when you concentrate all that water. Now it's going to be going down the hill. It's kind of like a Russian roulette. Who's going to end up with, where's this going to go downhill underground? So I have a feeling somebody's going to suffer from it.
Mr. Burke, do you have a response to that?
Well, groundwater is, kind of a funny animal, but water has memory in a sense. If you give it an opportunity to go in a direction, and that direction certainly could be, some poor individual's basement. The only way you're going to interrupt that is by providing change. So the thing is, what we're doing is detaining the water, allowing it to enter the groundwater stream in a controlled fashion, and release and join that groundwater flow. A lot of drainage problems, especially specifically for single family homeowners, is site specific in a sense that you could make one small improvement and that whole drainage situation changes. I'm familiar with the wall Mrs. Alave was talking about. I can see that particular situation causing a drainage problem for her lot in particular. So the key thing here is the site design that we are providing is something that has to not exacerbate any sort of situation off-site. Now, let me just say this too. John Chessier has reviewed my projects in the past, and I imagine he's going to review my projects in the future. And if he has a concern, then I aim to fix it. And there is an engineering solution to everything. So if the soils aren't there that I expect them to be, then we'll revise accordingly and design something that meets proper civil engineering standards. And that in itself should protect, will protect all the downgrading abutters in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Gobi?
Yeah, that'll be, most of these houses on the street were developed in the late 60s, early 70s. They don't have perimeter drains. They don't have, some of them don't have sump pumps, maybe. I don't know every house's story, but I think it would be nice if we could get some soil samples down here and maybe get some sort of idea of where this water is going to go.
I think it's headed for the brook.
Trout Brook is a problem.
Yeah. So that's what the brook's all about, right? And the brook's headed to the river, and the river's to the ocean. I think that's. I mean, I don't know. Frank O'Brien is the civil engineer amongst the three lawyers on the panel. So, but I think that's how it works. And I think to Mr. Gobi's point, it seems to me that the water that's headed down Meeting House, it is intercepted by Alfred and spills over onto those other properties as it heads to the brook. And it gets into the brook and then it discharges into Pine Tree Brook, right? And gets to Turner's Pond and stops at Central Ave and it's in the river. So, okay. Mr. Gobi, is there anything else?
Nope, that'll be it.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like?
Yes. I think Amy and Michael McGrath were next. Oh, Michael Howard's back on.
Mr. Howard.
Yeah.
Hello?
Mr. Howard, yes, welcome.
Well, good evening. Thank you. Sorry for the mishaps.
While you were away, the audience has had the opportunity to have your email that you sent to us today read. We also looked at the photographs and the video.
Right. So I had kind of caught a glimpse of that. What I'd like to say is that storm on June 28th was not a 5-year storm, not a 10-year storm or 20-year storm. It was a storm. We've been in that house for 3 years, and our garden has been flooded at least 2 to 3 times a year. We've seen as much as a foot in the back of the garden, a foot of water. And again, the purpose is to illustrate how that whole area works as a catch basin, and really how much water can come down that hill. That said, also, one of the things, looking at the drawings.
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt you.
Yes.
How far from Alfred Street are you? Are you at the corner?
So we're on Meeting House Lane on one end of the property and on Alfred on the other.
Okay. On the north side of Meeting House Lane?
On the north side of Meeting House Lane, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that was about the storm. The second thing is looking at drawings, I see that the catch basin, which is going to be south of the project, it remains pretty much the same, except that with the road going, we're going to increase the gradient at one point. And of course, my concern, not being a civil engineer, is that increased gradient could accelerate the runoff of the water down Meeting House Lane, and obviously other properties like the Changs or Mr. Goby that was talking. So relative to the water, those are the 2 points I wanted to make. I do have two other small points if I can.
Please.
One, we talked about the trees earlier. Mr. Burke mentioned that all the notable trees apparently plan on being saved. And I see that on the drawing on the south side, there's a lot of non-notable trees that are not noted. And when you live on Meeting House Lane, if you look towards the mansion, you can hardly see it. So those non-notable trees actually serve as a very effective barrier for the neighborhood. And preserving those trees would be essential. That is the point on the trees. And then one last point is we yesterday talked about the mass of the building. One of the things, and we talked about the economics of the project and why do we need 118 units. Now, Mr. Burke, if I understand those drawings properly, it's a 4-story building and the 4th floor has no apartments. What is there on the 4th floor?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not an architect, and I don't even have time to become one, like Frank,
Okay.
Mr.
So,
O'Brien.
basically, and I don't know if we have any ventilation systems or anything like that up there, but the way I look at the drawings right now, we have an empty floor, which does not participate to the economics of the project, but greatly enhances the mass of the project and therefore the disturbance for the surrounding community. And that would be my last point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Who's next, Beverly?
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if someone else on the line on behalf of the applicant other than Mr. Burke can explain what's happening with the 4th floor and if that is in fact the case.
Do you want me to actually explain?
No, I prefer, I think we like the applicant to answer the question. I made a note thinking that the architect's not here, Ms. Joffer, and I was thinking we'll come back to that. But to the extent there is somebody here, I see Mr. Tamposi. You recognize, please, welcome to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, this is Joe Tamposi from 582 Blue Hill Avenue, LLC. Based on the comment that was made, the 4th floor of the building does have apartments on it. The original building was designed with apartments on the entire 4th floor. As part of the review process during the mass housing project eligibility stage, the rear portions of both those wings, the 4th floor was removed in order to reduce the height of the building and reduce the massing by varying that roof line. So the rear portion has 3 stories of apartments, but then the front portion of the building has 4 stories of apartments.
Thank you, Mr. Tamposi. Is Mr. McGrath recognized? Is he ready?
It's Amy, his wife, Amy
Mrs.
McGrath.
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we live at 176 Robbins Street, and so we are, I have no idea what direction, but to the side of the site.
North of the site.
North of the site. We don't, our property lines don't touch, but we are very close. Delphi Academy's property is in between us. We have the intermittent stream on our property on a large portion of the property. Our lot is sort of long and narrow, and the stream that collects all of that water that's draining off of 130, not all of it, but some of it off of 138 comes through our property. I'm just going to tell you, so Delphi did do an addition, you know, when we first moved to the property. Delphi did an addition in the back, which was, you know, they did not go through Conservation Commission. I actually happen to be a real estate lawyer who has done 40Bs in the past, so I know how the permitting process works. And Delphi hadn't gone through the Conservation Commission. We requested that they do so, and actually Jim Burke represented Delphi in the Conservation Commission process. Part of that was evaluating the soil, see what was going to happen when they dropped the addition in. It's a very small addition that is, you know, just a, you know, not a, you know, overwhelming addition. They had the silt fence, they had all of that stuff. We were told nothing, it's going to be fine. Soils are great. You know, there's no peer review. It was a small project, etc. Promptly after this foundation was put in, the intermittent stream has large pieces of granite, and anybody, you know, you're welcome, the board and other people are welcome, you know, if you want to call us, we're happy to show you this. The intermittent stream has pieces of granite at various points that hold up the side to, you know, to keep it, you know, in a state that it's going to be collecting water. Promptly after, notwithstanding our objections that this was going to happen, and, you know, Jim's certification and all of these plans, promptly after this, the thing collapsed on the side. It didn't collapse the entire way, but granite that had been there for hundreds of years just moved. So I have serious concerns about what is going to happen to all of the people surrounding this site with the stormwater. I really appreciate the input that the civil engineer on behalf of the neighborhood association gave. It seems to be a lot of work to be done to really understand what's going on and what's going to happen. But I can tell you that to the side of the site is just from a very small addition that I don't even know, Jim, you know, you would know the footprint by looking at it, but, you know, smaller than a small house. You know, it greatly impacted the water flow and the way things were going. You know, had been going for, you know, however many hundreds of years, 100 years, whatever it is.
Ms. McGrath, can you tell us what number of Robbins you're at?
176.
Thank you. Mr. Burke, do you want to respond to that?
I think, I mean, I remember going through conservation for Delphi Academy, and I remember the addition, and I remember the granite lined channel that is defined as an intermittent stream. We went through the
Well,
same
it's
process.
actually classified as an intermittent stream by the Conservation Commission in Massachusetts,
It
in
is.
Milton. Yeah.
It is. I have a document that says it is.
Correct.
And,
I know that was agitating to you
Okay,
at the
we'll
time.
talk through the board. We're gonna talk through the board so that we don't.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead, Mr.
So, yeah, no, like I say, I mean, she's right. It's a small addition. This is the first I'm hearing. I believe it was done in 2006.
It was 2006 because I had a baby about 2 weeks before.
Okay. First I'm hearing that there was issues. I thought that project went smoothly and by the numbers. So I can certainly take a peek at it at the site walk and take a look at it. But the channel itself drains a portion of Blue Hill Ave, Voses Hill, and a portion of Brush Hill. The watershed is about 0.06 square miles, I want to say. And for the watershed to be considered a perennial stream, it has to be a half a mile. So it's way below the required watershed size. You do get some good flow out of it. I'll give you that.
Yep.
But because it's all channelized, it's all catch basin runoff off the street, off a state highway, as well as and as I forget the gentleman's name who lives up on Brush Hill Road with the bad soils. You get a lot of runoff off of there. That hill drains. and it connects up all the way down to Trout Brook. I'm familiar with it.
Okay, let me just frame this up, Mr. Burke, for you from what I'm hearing as the member of the board, and that is an abutter has raised an issue with respect to off-site runoff from a property that's nearby the locus. Similar, it's a much smaller project, but's caused a significant impact. So the way I would consider that with respect to this hearing is we want to understand what happened there, identify the similarities and things that are similar and maybe not similar to that circumstance, and try to identify what steps are being taken so that that situation isn't repeated. I think that's a reasonable framework to respond to Ms. McGrath's point. As well, I mean, I'm not going to say the board's not interested in the Delphi Academy addition. What we're interested in is not repeating that circumstance. So you can take that for a piece of homework.
Yeah, I guess I'm not familiar with any sort of failure over there.
No, I understand, but you've heard a testimony that there, as a result of that addition, there was a change in the way a pretty small addition. There was a large change in how the water went on to 176 Robin Street, and I think the concern and my question is what steps are being taken so that something like that won't be repeated. I'm not asking for an answer tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've got a sufficient number of unresolved issues, including the condition of the soil, the section that Mr. Chesia recommended, and a whole host of issues that have come up with respect to particularly downgradient properties that are experiencing suboptimal situation now, and we certainly don't want to add to that that situation. I think that's a fair summary of it. Although, Ms. McGrath, let me ask you: is that the point?
Yes, I mean it's certainly not to. We have a very cordial relationship with Delphi over the years. It didn't start out well because of the addition, but we have a very strong relationship with them. And it's not that I want them to go and, do stuff and fix it because it's a school and I don't, feel that's appropriate. I mean, it's when I say it's working, it's that there was an impact in terms of movement of granite due to, and I can only assume, again, I'm a lawyer, not a civil engineer, that when you stuck a foundation into really sandy soil over there, to be honest, stuff started running down and moved the dirt that was around the granite, and the granite started coming in. So, we did say if it ended up closing the conduit because it was pushing in so much, obviously we were going to have to, address it, with the town and with Delphi. But it hasn't done that. And I don't think that I don't think it will unless, there's something else happens, because it's been a while since there's been movement.
Fair enough. Thank you. Does anybody else like to be recognized?
There is none.
Okay. Board members of the board have anything you'd like to add?
I don't have a question, but I'd just like to echo the chairman's, I think, summary and comments on a lot of the concerns that have been raised. And I guess I'm a little surprised because my impression yesterday from the applicant's perspective was that there wouldn't be issues. But I think what I'm hearing today is maybe there are things that you would do better or design differently on a second look, and especially in light of comments and concerns raised today. So I look forward to seeing the sort of adjustments and explanations and assurances that we can hopefully give to the neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jaffer. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with my colleagues' comments, and I would also note that the applicant's counsel noted last night that this is an iterative process. This may be an area where we may want to see more iterations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Ms. Batista, I'm sorry, I've got a little, maybe I don't know what it is. Batista, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Mr. Burke understands that stormwater is very important to us and that we do have some very serious concerns. So we are hopeful that substantial changes will be made.
Great, thank you. Mr. Zawinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're a little unstable.
Let me.
The connection to Dorchester.
Sorry about that. Is that a little better?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is something that you and the board may need to put just a little bit of thought into as it relates to, first of all, I think the more the merrier when it comes to certified professionals looking at these projects. So I think we appreciated Mr. Chessia's testimony. Our DPW director has his written testimony and is reviewing it. As it relates to the peer review studies on stormwater and engineering, and also the other topics that the board has commissioned, we're getting those rolling. In the interest of their review not being a sort of moving target, I wonder if we want to think about sort of, how the applicant is going to take some of these critiques and questions in and make those adjustments so that they can be done in a holistic fashion.
It's excellent question. I wonder if we couldn't ask the applicant to caucus and to report back to us on Tuesday the 26th with a plan to address some of these, particularly the major issues that have come out in both the town and in Mr. Chessia's review, particularly in terms of the additional sampling that may be required in order to prove out the base concept. Otherwise, to Mr. Zawinski's point, it may be that the peer review comes back with something that might reflect a failure, or it just can't be done, and simply requesting more data. That would not be a good peer review, I think. That would be a bad result. And I say that only because it's simply repeating where we are today. We need to, I think Mr. Zawinski's point is to the extent that the plans are going to be modified, improved, and expanded upon by additional data, let's do that now before the peer review is done. So the question to you, Mr. Burke, is or Mr. Tamposi, what would be the plan for that? Is that what we're hearing? And then what would be the schedule?
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's something that we'll need to discuss with our team. I know that, early on in the process, our counsel was, suggesting that peer review be retained very early. And so I think our goal is, as Mr. Czerwinski pointed out, we don't want to have a moving target as we're working through these various different reviews. So, ideally it would be, one revision that's addressing kind of all of the comments. But again, that's something I think that we should discuss among our team, and we can give you a better answer at the next meeting.
Okay. So the next hearing will be Tuesday, the 26th.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can just chime in on one more kind of point around this.
Please.
And it relates not just, when I say holistic, I mean, I was actually watching a very interesting panel on 40B design review today that our illustrious consultant, Ms. Barrett, was moderating. I think to the extent that as perhaps, the design review comes back and, perhaps the shape, size, massing, height, siting of the project may or may not change. could have material effects on the stormwater system. So it's not just, looking at everyone's comments on one issue, but really kind of looking at the whole building. And if there are changes to the shape, density, other issues that come out of these reviews. So I just think, keeping all that in mind, understanding Mr. Tamposi's, concerns about getting these things done early. We're moving as fast as we can to be timely on this stuff. But I think, I would second his desire for kind of a single set of revisions, or at least revisions that occur at a point, where all of the information is in at one time.
I think we're unanimous. I think the applicant, the town, and the board are unanimous on the need for an efficient peer review. Mr. Zawinski, anything else?
That's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tamposi, are you all set?
Yes, no, nothing further at this point.
Okay. All right. Let me make a couple of comments. So we will be meeting at 10 o'clock at the site, or at least 20 of us will be meeting, 20 members of the neighbors, and I know the applicant's team will be there, members of the board will be there 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. The following Saturday morning, there'll be another hearing. There'll be another site visit at 10 o'clock for 20 more citizens. The applicant has requested to do multiple site walks on a Saturday, which is acceptable and I think reasonable in light of the fact that you want to disrupt the tenant on the property as little as possible. However, because we've already scheduled people for the 30th, we'd like to go forward with the 30th. So we'll do the 23rd and the 30th. And then to the extent that we have a third batch, we'll do it at noon on the 30th. I think that would give us an hour and a half to tour the site. I don't know, that seems plenty of time from my perspective. If you, Mr. Tamposi, think it's going to take longer, then we'll schedule the second hearing on the 30th at 1 o'clock. But it felt to me like noon was enough time, but I'll be guided by your judgment on that.
Sure, and I'd like to get our architect's input before I answer that, but I think that, an hour and a half would be more than sufficient.
All right. So tentatively, what we're looking at is a site tour at 10 o'clock on Saturday. Not tentatively, that's planned, and it'll go to about 11:30 for people's schedules. Then that'll be the first site visit. The second site visit will be Saturday morning on the 30th, and the third site visit at 10 o'clock, and the third site visit, to the extent it's necessary, will be at noon, pending Mr. Tamposi's confirmation of that time. But that's basically what we're looking at. And for anybody who wants to see the site, please get in touch with Ms. Sutton at bsutton at townofmilton.org. Maybe, is that what it is?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. All right.
And if Mr. Tamposi can please just address this and get back to me by the beginning of the week, because we have a posting that needs to be addressed no less than 48 hours with the town of Milton. So if I could just, if we could arrange that with the timing, then I can post it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Attorney Schomer will be in touch on that.
Okay, perfect.
So before I recess the hearing, I want to make one other point. There's been testimony about the gardens, the significance of the gardens, the historical character of the gardens, et cetera. That does touch on the local needs of the town. And I have asked our consultant to work with the applicant on a peer review of the attempt to preserve those gardens. So I wanted to talk with Mr. Schomer about that tonight. We haven't had the opportunity to do that, but I also want to keep people apprised of the dynamic nature of this hearing. And that's something that happened between last night and today. Given the testimony that we heard, the data that we've got in the record already, and Ms. Barrett's recommendation on peer review, we've accepted that and are going to pursue peer review for that. So, and that is not part of the original peer review consultants that we've lined up. So we can talk about that in more detail Tuesday night. But for now, I'm going to, unless there's additional information that people would like to share with us or from the board, I'd like to recess this hearing. Oh, Mr. O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind refreshing my recollection on the subject matter for next Tuesday night.
Traffic and safety.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Chairman.
looking ahead, here's where we're headed. We've got traffic and safety next Tuesday. Then we recess for the following Tuesday. There'll be a site visit in the meantime. We'll recess for the following Tuesday for project finances, to be followed by the waivers. And that will be, that's the, unless the applicant modify, oh, Mr. Schumer's here.
Sorry.
We almost, if O'Brien hadn't asked the question, I think we would have been able to recess the hearing without Mr. Schumer showing up, but he's here. So we're looking at next Tuesday, traffic and safety, the following Tuesday, finance, and then the waivers. And then what I was going to say is, I suppose there'll be an opportunity to supplement the application. Does Mr. Schumer, would you like to be recognized?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. I apologize to the members. I did have a last minute hearing that came up, and I expected that to be about 20 to 30 minutes, and it ended up being a very heated 2 hours and 12 minutes. And so I apologize for not being here tonight.
So we don't want to talk about the hearing that you just got out of. I see Mr. Hill has joined us. Perhaps he was in the same hearing.
He was.
Welcome. I will say Ms. Baptista did a terrific job on behalf of the Vos Hill Associates, so our neighborhood association. So
one comment, Mr. Chair, if I may. I have reached out to our 40B consultant, Bob Engler, and he will be attending the, not next Tuesday's hearing, but the following hearing regarding the waivers. And our traffic engineers are lined up for this coming Tuesday for traffic.
Perfect. All right. And then we want to hear a little bit from you on finance as well.
Understood.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to recess this hearing. I will see some of you, many of you, on Saturday at 10 o'clock. We will see you at 10 o'clock on Saturday, and we'll reconvene this hearing at 7 p.m. next Tuesday evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evening all.
Have a good evening. Bye now.
Good night.
Bye.